Mikadesh HaShabbat. If you have a handout that looks like it's entirely in English, we're going to be doing a discussion that is in our Chumashim, but I'm actually going to ask that we instead use the handout for this discussion. The heading says the story of Cain and Abel. This is a story that many of us may be familiar with that occurs in the second half of this week's Torah portion, which wasn't read today. And I thought that we could discuss some of the many questions that we have when reading it, because although it seems straightforward, it's actually very deeply provocative. So we're going to actually be reading this story together out loud in English, and we're going to stop at key points to have a little discussion. I'm going to take a moment to make sure that everybody has their handout. All right, we're going to read together. Now Adam knew his wife Eve, and she conceived and bore Cain, saying, I have gained a male child with the help of Hashem. She then bore his brother Abel. Abel became a keeper of sheep, and Cain became a tiller of the soil. In the course of time, Cain brought an offering to Hashem from the fruit of the soil, and Abel, for his part, brought the choicest of firstlings of his flock. Hashem paid no heed to Abel and his offering, but to Cain and his offering, Hashem paid no heed. Cain was much distressed, and his face fell. And we're going to stop there for now. So I want to ask, what are some possible reasons why it seems that Hashem would much prefer Abel's offering over that of Cain's? Josh.
Born first, and then Abel. Abel becomes a keeper of sheep, and then Cain becomes a tiller of soil. So I think that's kind of interesting. And so my next comment, where Cain brought an offering as shown from the fruit of the soil, but Abel brought the choicest of the first place.
Wow, Josh.
So not only does it seem like Abel, despite being younger, at least in the order of the steps, starts working the land first, before his brother. And while Cain brings an offering, he will make sure to bring the best. And I feel like that, I don't know, might have some...
So yeah, you gave us a lot to chew on there. Thank you, Josh. So yeah, it seems that Cain is born first, but Abel is the first one, it seems, to take up a profession. And it does seem that Abel brought his very best. Cain may have also brought his best, but it doesn't say so. And just to double check the Hebrew to make sure, and I know this was an accurate translation because I checked, but yes, it does not say that Cain brought the choicest of his offering. So thank you, Josh. That is a lot to think about. Anybody else? Why might God like Abel's offering more? Again, when it's not clear in the Torah, this is when we have to imagine what might have been, knowing that it might not have happened the way we think it might. Esther. Interesting. Animals have life. They are of more limited supply. Perhaps Abel might have sacrificed something more valuable. Thank you, Esther. I want to ask now, if Cain and Abel although they are the sons of Adam and Eve, they are also, it seems, God's children, not literally born of God, but God does act as a parental figure to them in this story. And so, for whatever reason, although God may prefer Abel's offering, what are the consequences when you have two children and one of them does better than the other, and you choose to praise one and neglect the second? We're not going to answer, we're just going to think about it for a moment. We're going to continue now with our story. And Hashem said to Cain, "Why are you distressed, and why is your face fallen? Surely if you do right, there is uplift. But if you do not do right, sin crouches at the door. Its urge is toward you, yet you can be its master." We're going to stop there. And this is what many people try to do when they have a predisposition, it seems, to sin. They say, maybe I have an urge to do something bad, but I can conquer it. I can be the master of my impulses. Of course, God in the Torah knows all that has happened and all that ever will happen. And God knows that Cain is not going to be able to get his act together. And so I ask you now, if God knows that Cain is not going to master his urge towards sin, why does God say this to him? Josh?
Couple thoughts. The first one, not necessarily for Cain in the us reading.
I think that's highly appropriate. Yes, it might be that it's not for Cain that God says this, that God might be saying it because God knows that we are going to read it, or the authors of the Torah know that we need to read it, and it gives a lesson for us. Was there more, Josh?
And the other thought I had is that this might seem contradictory to us because we live in a but clear that God is outside of creation. While God may know everything, God still needs people. And so that means that humans, it's not preordained. And that might be a little weird to think. It's like, well, how can God know the future? So to speak. Like, in some ways, it doesn't matter if we understand the way God thinks. What matters is that in this particular instance, God is saying to Cain, you can change, move to the better, and almost doesn't even matter at this point. It's happening in the present.
All right, well, thank you, Josh. So yeah, maybe God does know the future, but that doesn't mean that we don't have free will. And it does seem that perhaps God wanted Cain to have all that was in his power to try his best to conquer it. Maybe even if God knew that it wasn't going to happen, it wouldn't be fair if Cain didn't at least get the best advice possible. We're going to continue. There's a ... There's an ellipse here, and that's not me editing it out. This is a part of the Torah where it literally doesn't tell us what comes next. We don't know what Cain said to Abel here. Cain said to his brother Abel, ... And when they were in the field, Cain set upon his brother Abel and killed him. Hashem said to Cain, "Where is your brother Abel?" And he said, "I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper?" Then Hashem said, "What have you done? Your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. Therefore you shall be more cursed than the ground, which opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. If you till the soil, it shall no longer yield its strength to you. You shall become a ceaseless wanderer on earth." Cain said to Hashem, "My punishment is too great to bear. Since you have banished me this day from the soil, I must avoid your presence and become a restless wanderer on earth. Anyone who meets me may kill me." Now, I know that Cain is not someone that we are to admire in many respects. Nevertheless, many people could argue that this is perhaps the first prayer in the Torah. It is not necessarily an elegant prayer, one that is super respectful necessarily. It doesn't say, anything like Avinu Malkeinu or Ribono Shel Olam. But this is someone crying out to God, "Please help me." It wasn't the first punishment in the Torah. That was Adam and Eve and the serpent. But there was nothing they said that could be interpreted as a prayer, it seems. Might be shocking that Cain might have been the first one to give a prayer, but that is what many people do when they have nowhere else to turn. We're going to finish the story. Hashem said to him, "I promise, if anyone kills Cain, vengeance shall be taken on them sevenfold." And Hashem put a mark on Cain, lest anyone who met him should kill him. Cain left the presence of Hashem and settled in the land of Nod, east of Eden. Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Enoch. And he founded a city and named the city after his son Enoch. Now I think this is probably the hardest question for me, at least. What does it say to us that after Cain killed his brother purposefully, that he was allowed to remain free and to start a family? And it seems here that nothing really happens to him other than the mark given by Adonai, which some might say is a curse, others might say it's a form of protection. Cain doesn't die, it seems, for 6 generations by most counts. So how do we feel that he was allowed to, keep on living, start a family, no form of prison? I see Josh, I'd love to call on you. Is there anybody else, just to make sure that we can spread this around? Esther? Oh, Jason, did he see? God is merciful. Retributive justice doesn't work, you say, Esther. Interesting. So you're hitting on something that I want to get back to later, and I'm so glad you mentioned that, Esther. Josh.
So actually, Esther just said, I actually just saw a tweet days ago about prison reform, because punitive justice isn't justice. It's just something I want to bring up. Left the presence of Hashem and settled in the land of Hashem isn't localized to a place. Oh, it's really going to presence of Hashem. So it has to be something. Perhaps that is punishment. Also, with the mark on Cain, everybody who's alive is going to be sibling or otherwise directly related. Therefore, also directly related. So it's not just that killed as he should escape justice. But maybe it's because God doesn't want siblings to kill him.
All right, so once again, that's a lot to chew on. So I'm just going to recap some of your points here. East of Eden, he settled in the land of Nod. And that doesn't mean that God wasn't there necessarily, because like you said, Josh, Hashem is everywhere. And yet it does say that Cain left the presence of Hashem when he went to settle in the land of Nod, east of Eden. So maybe those two things are not as connected as they seem. Maybe he left the presence of Hashem for some reason that has something to do with something other than where he chose to settle. And Gabby, and then we're going to wrap it up. Oh.
And so maybe
Mm. Mm. Well, Gabby, I don't think I'm going to ever read this story the same way again. Gabby said that when Cain said to Hashem, my punishment is too great to bear, perhaps he wasn't saying, lift the punishment from me. Perhaps he was saying, if this is how I'm going to be punished, then just let me die. Is that what you said? And if that's how it happened, which maybe it did, then it would seem that Hashem's answer is, no, I'm not going to kill you. I'm not going to let you die. I mean, that's the whole point of the story, right? We don't want to kill. That's what this whole thing is about. So thank you all for such amazing answers on this beautiful story. Just to put a ribbon on this, by many accounts, Cain went on to live for 6 more generations. Ironically, he was killed eventually, it seems, by a family member, a minor character named Lamech. It's not explicitly stated in the Torah, but there are several references that allude to what happened in the Torah, and other texts take those references and make them more explicit. If Cain was truly evil, rotten to the core, then perhaps he had no regrets about killing his brother Abel. I believe he did, and I believe Hashem knew it. 6 generations, like Gabby said, is a long time to live with your guilt. We think about Hashem as a parental figure for Cain. Hashem essentially might have said, now go and think about what you've done, son. Think about it for 6 generations. And like Esther and Josh said, and also in a way what Jason said, though other sections of the Torah are very heavy on capital punishment, this section shows that there is more than one way to deal with a murderer. Thank you for that great discussion. And we're going to actually go and bless the upcoming month now because we have enough